So just to recapitulate, what I have discussed is, in the context of equilibrium income, we are assuming that in economy attains equilibrium income when aggregate demand becomes equal to aggregate supply. So then we were trying to find out what the aggregate demand, different types of demands are. We confined our analysis to two major demand functions. One is consumption demand, the other one is investment demand. Though there are other demands as well, like for example, the government purchase is also another kind of a demand. And when you open up the economy, there are exports and imports. Import is a leakage, export is an injection. So I was discussing, or I have already discussed, the consumption function as Keynes proposed. What he suggested is that as an economy becomes more and more prosperous, the fraction of the income consumed decreases and the fraction of the income saved increases. Unless all that is saved is invested, the economy experiences deficiency in demand given supply, leading to recession. So that takes us to the next topic, that is, how can you ensure high investment in the economy, or what determines investment? So I started the discussion on this in the previous class. What I discussed was what is investment, how is investment different from capital, what is the difference between gross investment and net investment. So today I'm going to discuss what are the types of investment, and then the factors determining investment as Keynes proposed. So if we broadly classify all the types of investment for an economy into different categories, we come across three types of investment. One is business fixed investment or non-residential investment. Another is residential investment, and the third one is inventory investment. So any investment we talk about fits into either of these three types of investment we talk about for an economy at large. Among the three, the most critical and the significant component is the first one, that is business fixed or non-residential investment. As the very term says, it is non-residential. It is anything which is not related to the residential investment. So it could be, I mean, what is this all about? It could be any amount of fixed asset creation that you undertake or you make in any kind of business, be it manufacturing, be it banking, be it insurance, be it IT, anywhere, when you make some amount of investment in creating certain fixed assets, that becomes the business fixed investment. Like when it comes to a steel plant, a plant is installed. The plant itself is the non-residential investment. It is an asset which is created in course of making investment. Similarly, suppose it's a business of, like it's an IT company, you are buying computers, or you have a complex where the business is being carried out. So you have created a building structure. So this building is not actually the residential investment. This is not meant for the residential purpose. It is for the business purpose. And the computers you install, or for that sense, any kind of machine you install, that becomes a part of the business fixed investment. So that is one major component of the total investment, which is followed by residential investment, which is gaining momentum in a country like India, for instance. Till the other day, it was only the private entities, you and me, who were directly buying land and constructing buildings for our own residential purposes in cities. Today, many private companies have joined hands. You have Tata Housing, you have Sahara, you have DLF, and so on and so forth. So you find many private players which have joined this particular business. So you have realty sector or the real estate sector where there is huge amount of investment coming in across the country. So residential investment turns out to be yet another very important investment, which is different from the business fixed investment. Third one is the inventory investment, which is not basically a standalone investment. This is an investment which arises when there is business fixed investment or residential investment or both. Inventory investment by itself has no meaning. It arises when you undertake another business. And what is inventory investment? It is a kind of a stockpiling activity on the part of a company. The goods which are stored in the warehouse becomes a part of the inventory investment. So different companies build up their inventories to meet unforeseen contingencies. Any business you carry out, you like to have something in store, something in the warehouse to meet unforeseen contingencies. So this investment can take various forms. It can be raw material inventory. It can be semi-finished goods inventory. It can be finished goods inventory. It would vary from company to company what kind of investment in the form of inventory investment they would like to have. It can be a combination also. A company can have both finished and semi-finished goods inventories, or semi-finished and raw material inventories, or something like that, or any other combinations. So what are these different types of inventories I'm talking about? Like, for example, a company can have only finished goods inventories. Let me also clarify one more thing, that inventory investment that you talk about can be planned. It can also be unplanned. It can be planned. It can be unplanned. There can be planned inventories. There can be unplanned inventories. So what is the difference? Like, for example, if Tata Motors has already made an estimate about the market demand for its product, it is launching a new car model. It has already estimated the demand for its cars, on the basis of which it has come to the conclusion that it should manufacture 1 lakh cars, which would be in demand currently. In the current time period, 1 lakh cars will be in demand. But then what it does, it actually manufactures 1,10,000 cars. Extra 10,000 cars it manufactures to meet unforeseen contingencies. It has estimated that this would be the demand, and estimation may always go wrong. So it is better that the company remains prepared to meet unforeseen contingencies, some additional demand, some extra demand than what it had estimated. So though it estimated that 1 lakh cars would be in demand, it decided to manufacture 1,10,000 cars. So these 10,000 cars would be kept in the warehouse. It knew that 1 lakh cars would be in demand, so it has manufactured extra 10,000 cars which would be kept in which would be stored in the warehouses that it possesses. You would wonder why the company does so. Why does the company keep 10,000 extra cars? If it has estimated there would be demand for 1 lakh cars, and even if there is greater demand, how does it really matter? Let company sell 1 lakh cars if it has manufactured 1 lakh. Why should it have more than that? The reason is that when a company loses one customer, when the product is not available in the stores. Possibly, it creates a kind of a ripple effect, a multiplier effect, that it could lose 10 customers for one customer it loses directly. You like to buy, I mean, there are people who do not have a fixed choice, but they have a fixed budget. One likes to buy Maruti car only, or one likes to buy Tata Motors car only. That is one kind of a taste. Another is one doesn't have a fixed choice. Budget is fixed, that it would spend, the person would spend 5 lakh rupees maximum. So there are many cars available at 5 lakh rupees. It can be i10, Hyundai's i10. It can be WagonR. It can be even some model of Tata Motors. So it goes to Tata Motors to buy a particular model which has a price of about 5 lakh rupees. But the company, I mean, the dealer tells that the product is not available. It will come after 15 days. This person doesn't have a fixed choice. So what this person could do would go to the next showroom, which is Hyundai showroom, and would buy the car, Hyundai i10 suppose, or i20. Then it is not that the Tata Motors has lost one customer. Because you have bought one, you have bought i20 or i10, then your neighbors should also buy i20 or i10, your friends will buy, and it is something that you come across these days. That is the reason why there is a referral system these days you come across. Many companies go for referral system. If you bought a car or something, then the company.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, actually means I have a question regarding the business fixed investment and residential invest. Sir, you can invest in the residential investment as well as in business fixed investment in means in a together mode, sir, right? Because many companies they build their offices in many residential areas. So if you are investing in that office, so you are also investing in the business fixed investment and also residential investment.
Yeah, I got
So
your. Yeah, I got. See, what I'm trying to tell you is that if I am using, I have created a building for the purpose of business. Okay, I mean for another kind of a business. I am not a. See, what you are talking about is Tata. It has diversified its business. It is onto all kinds of things. Tata is onto Tata Motors, automobile sector. It is also onto IT. It is also into housing. So it creates a
yes,
housing.
sir, yes.
Yeah, it creates a housing project, and a part of the housing project is utilized by itself for its own other business. Okay, that's what you are referring to. But
And
what?
and sir, one more prospect on this matter, sir, means I am also stating that kind of thing. Suppose Tata Motor or Tata Steel is a big company and they are opening a new branch, or State Bank is opening a new branch. Then they are just hiring one particular house or one particular complex. So they are also investing in their business in the form of that residential investment, sir.
No. That's what I'm trying to tell you. That let's draw a line between this the very term we're using, residential investment. The moment it is a residential investment, it is basically for the purpose of residence. Okay. The other thing is that it is a business, and that business involves some investment for the people to stay. Okay. Look at it. What I'm trying to tell you is that suppose my executives will stay in a building, and I have created that building for my within that business. Now it is not residential investment. It is a business investment, business fixed investment. I have decided that I'll start a new automobile. Suppose Tata Motors. I have decided to launch a new car model, and I will invest suppose 100 crore rupees on that. That 100 crore rupees of investment also involves not only setting up the plant, but also creating a building where my new executives will be recruited for this company will stay. Look at it. This new executives who will stay in this building will work in this Tata Motors company. Okay, this under the new project. So this is not typically a residential that residential investment company has done. It is the business fixed investment, which is, I mean, it is like the automobile business, which the company has started. And there is, in the process of doing the automobile business, the company has also created various kinds of assets, fixed assets. One of them is the building. One of them is a residential building where the executives are staying. Another is, as I told you, it has also installed many computers. Another is, it has installed the plant, and so on. So the sum total of that, the value of all that becomes the business fixed investment I'm referring to. We'll have to draw a line. I mean, just to differentiate between, see, at the end of the day, investment is investment. You may not say, you know, whether it is this investment or that investment. But if you like to draw a line, and this is how you can draw the line. I'm not. Are you getting the point, Arghya?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm getting your point. So,
So
there is a smooth silk line between that business fixed investment and residential investment. And
exactly.
I could understand from your lecture that the residential investment is totally for the purpose of the residence. Means
Yes.
that will be not used for any business, and the business fixed investment is totally for the business. That's what I
Exactly.
understand from your lecture. So, thank you.
Yeah. That is right. And in fact, suppose Sahara, Tata Housing Project, DLA project, all these, you know, that so many, even government also joins that, you know, that low housing projects and all that government undertakes in various cities. These are all a part of the residential investment that we are carrying out, I mean, throughout the country. So that is only for the residential purpose. Okay, we are drawing a line between the residential. I mean, if you like to know from the point of view of some other purposes, that how much we are investing for the purpose of residential. I mean, for the purpose of for real estate sector, and how much we are spending on other kinds of business. So just to draw a line, we can do it. Otherwise, investment is investment. Doesn't matter where you are investing. Even IT business is also creating employment, and manufacturing business is also creating employment. So everywhere there is investment we are carrying out. Okay.
But sir, means sir, just one question more regarding this, sir. Sir, if I want to create some post, means I want to create some vacancies or something like this, then which is more, I think, beneficial or beneficiaries, that business fixed investment or residential investment? Because both of
obviously
them
business,
create.
obviously business fixed. Remember,
Okay.
see, obviously business fixed resident. See, you'll have to look at it from other perspectives. As you rightly said, you'll have to create employment also. Where do you create more employment? Do you create more employment through construction of buildings only for residential purposes, or you create more employment by creating, setting up a automobile plant? You know, if you start a new or Apple, suppose your this what is that computer plant or mobile plant. So you create more employment there, unlike the residential this thing. And residence, another, there is a danger also. There is a kind of a critical aspect to look into when it comes to residential investment. In fact, residential investment, suppose I built apartments in a city. Okay, DLF builds apartments in the city. That is DLF's investment. Then one 3-bedded apartment in Kolkata city in New Town area, you'll have to pay about suppose 70 lakh rupees or 80 lakh rupees or 1 crore rupees. Or if it is in Mumbai city, then you'll have to pay 2 crore or 5 crore rupees for a 3-bedded apartment. So look at it. The you create, I mean, how much of investment you are creating? You make huge amount of the investment to create buildings, and there must be takers of it, and in the process you create hardly very little amount of employment for the people who would be engaged in the job. I mean, while constructing the building and all that, very little people, very less number of people are engaged. Whereas, look at creating a mobile. You set up a mobile plant. A mobile is sold as 10,000 rupees or 5,000 rupees or 2,000 rupees even. Okay, and you manufacture lakhs of mobiles, and in the process you employ, lakhs of people or thousands of people in the business. So this is the difference between, when it comes to where to invest. Even not only that, I'm giving you another thing, the IT versus the manufacturing. Whether we should promote more IT sector business, or you should promote more manufacturing sector business. In fact, if you look
And
at
I think, sir, the government
yes,
is doing it right now in the mode of the smart cities, sir. Means they are collabing the whole IT sectors with the construction ones, and then just making the smart city. The project is going on in Dhalera right now, Dhalera, Gujarat.
everywhere it is happening. See, I am not telling that any kind of investment you are doing, it is required and it is creating employment, it is improving the quality of life, and all that is required. I am not questioning that. What I am telling is that, as you asked me, something like at the end of the day, any investment you make makes leads to many kinds of implications. It has many implications for the economy. One is that it generates income for the people. Another is it employs many people, just not few people. So you'll have to be very careful about deciding where to invest, or when it comes to government promoting investment in the economy through certain measures, which sector has to be promoted more compared to others. If you look at India in today's context, I'm just giving I'll give an anecdote and then I'll switch about to other topic. So if you look at Indian economy today, in India, when you look at three sectors, there are three sectors which produce output, and the sum total of the output becomes the total output of the total income of the country or of the economy. One is primary sector led by agriculture and allied activities. Then secondary sector led by manufacturing. Third is tertiary sector called service sector. Service sector includes IT, banking, insurance, and so on. So this is called service sector. Interestingly, when it comes to the share of the income, the three sectors contribute, and compare that to the share of the employment, you get a very interesting picture here. The share of income, when you look at the share of the income of the three sectors, agriculture sector contributes less than 20%. Okay, but employs about 60% of the total population. Agriculture contributes less than 20% to the total income. I mean, out of the, if the total income of the Indian economy today is $3 trillion, only 20% or less than that is coming from agriculture and allied activities, whereas it employs about 60% of the total population. Second is manufacturing, which is basically secondary sector. That employs or that contributes about 20 to 25%. Okay, 20 to 25% of the total GDP comes from manufacturing sector. Okay, and the employment is about 20 to 25%. That varies from year to year. Come to the tertiary sector, which is service sector, IT, banking, insurance, and all that. Its contribution to income of the economy is about 55 to 57%, whereas it only employs about 20%. 20 to 25% people are employed in the service sector. Now you analyze by yourself which sector should be promoted for creating more employment. Obviously, it is manufacturing. The manufacturing sector creates more employment because if its share to GDP is 20% and share to employment is close to 20%, compared to IT, banking, insurance, its share to GDP is 55% and 57%, but it employs only 20 to 25%. So then obviously the employment intensity of the growth is lower with services compared to the employment intensity of the manufacturing. So if you like, in a country like India, which has a labor surplus economy, you have huge population and everybody is seeking jobs. So you need to promote manufacturing, then only you can create more employment. But one would say that, okay, every sector is important, and as you are referring to, suppose smart cities, IT is linked to building, construction of apartments and all that, roads and everything becomes a composite kind of a project in under the smart city project of different cities. That is all fine from the point of view of quality of life, improvement in the quality of life, and so on, or industrialization. But when you look at it from the point of view of the employment creation, you need to see that more industries come up in the country. So that is the thing. I mean, when I talk about manufacturing, it is just not about big manufacturing houses, not like Tata Motors or Tata Steel I'm talking about. I'm also talking about MSME sector, small scale industries, medium scale industries, tiny industries. They also create huge amount of employment. Rather, they create more employment than the big manufacturing houses. So you need to promote them. So that's the thing. The topic is different because you asked me. I thought that let me explain this. So there is a paradox. When you talk about employment vis-a-vis income generation, you may create income for the economy, but you may not be creating employment. Then people question that where is income? Where is employment? You may have been able to create a lot of incomes for the economy, but you have not been able to convert that into employment. That becomes a challenge to the economy. So that's the thing where you need to see which sector you need to promote when it comes to the government measures and all that. Okay, so let me. I think I have clarified. Though it
Yes,
was
sir.
a
Yes,
kind of,
thank you.
yeah. So I deviated a bit, but then let me again come back to my point, which I was talking about. I was talking about the inventory investment. As I told you, a company can go for various kinds of inventories. One can be the finished goods inventory. But I gave you the reason why a company has to go for finished goods inventory. Because if you lose one customer, you don't actually lose one customer. You might be losing 10 different customers in the process because of the neighborhood effect. I mean, I buy a particular car, my neighbors keep buying the same car, getting lured by, they ask me, and then I tell that this is a good product. And then people in the neighborhood keep buying the same car. I buy a mobile, and my in the friend circle, all my friends keep buying the same mobile. So all these things. So that is the reason why these days there are companies which go for depending upon this as a source of creating demand for their product. This referral business. For example, Citibank. Citibank if anybody is having any, your parents might be having Citibank cards. You can check that Citibank credit card. The company tells to a person who already has a Citibank credit card, it tells that if you find out 5 customers for us who would buy our Citibank card, then for each single customer you recommend, they say referral, each single person you recommend, 2,000 rupees will be credited to your account. So you get 10,000 rupees credited to your account by referring 5 persons who would buy the Citibank cards or who would be the members of the Citibank cards. And why does the company do this? Because company knows you can convince your friends better than the company executives or company sales people making a call. These days you get calls from the call centers that you buy our product, do this, then do that. The moment you receive a call, the first thing you do is that you don't feel like talking to them because you are not free and all that. And an unknown voice is always ignored. So you don't like to talk. But when your friend tells, then you might like to buy it. Then the companies go for semi-finished goods inventories. The company, instead of converting the goods into final goods, they might have semi-finished goods inventories ready. The moment they get the order, they convert the semi-finished goods into finished goods. And these days there is an assembly line when it comes to companies. Most of the manufacturing companies I'm talking about, there is an assembly line. So the companies do not make the final product ready by huge amount. They rather make the semi-finished goods ready. When the place get the order, they convert the semi-finished goods into finished goods so that they save the cost. Why should they convert the goods from semi-finished to finished if they are not in demand currently? Because when they convert, they engage labor, they bear a cost. Suppose there is no demand for the good in the current period, so they lose their own profit. So better that they wait until the demand is received. Similarly, the companies can go for raw material inventory. Some companies can go for raw material inventories. It could happen for various reasons. Like maybe companies expect the prices to rise in future. The prices of the raw materials to rise in future. So they store the raw materials well in advance so that they don't experience a higher cost of production in the future, which would be factored into the prices at which they would be selling the product. So they would, this could be one reason. Another reason could be that there could be sudden shortage of the raw materials. So to meet unforeseen contingencies of this kind, suddenly there is shortage of, there is a natural calamity. The raw materials cannot be supplied and your plant cannot stop production. So unless you have the raw materials ready much in advance, you might be forced to close the business, close the plant. So that is very much problematic. So it is always better that you have more raw materials in stored than what you immediately require, and so on. There could be various other reasons. Even the cash in hand with the companies, they may not, they have planned to invest 100 crore rupees, but they will keep 10 crore rupees as just the cash in hand to meet unforeseen contingencies. So these are all examples of inventory investment. Now, no matter whether it is business fixed investment or residential investment or inventory investment, the reason or the decision to invest is the factors determining the decision to investment could be more or less same. Why the companies invest, why the firms invest, why the economy invests, what is the guiding principle behind the investment? It is the profit. Entrepreneurs are there to earn profit from their business. So no matter what kind of investment I'm referring to, there is always the profit motive which guides the firms. Now, given this, what I'm going to discuss now is the decisions to invest and the factors determining the same as proposed by Keynes. Because you remember I'm talking about Keynesian economics, so I'm only discussing Keynesian proposition. What, according to Keynes, determines investment? When a firm or a company plans to invest, what is the guiding principle? What is the motive behind the decision to invest? Remember, once the investment is over, there is no reversal. So before the investment is made, every single company makes an appraisal of the investment project proposal. So what is that appraisal all about? To estimate what would be the amount of cost to be incurred by the firm in the business, the new business. How much of capital to be required in the new business? 100 crore, 200 crore, 500 crore. How much the company should invest in the new business? Then how much of revenue the company will get? For how many years the business will continue? 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. For how many years the company will continue to undertake the new business? And annually, how much would be the return the company would get? And what would be the additional cost to be borne every year in course of selling the product? All information are to be acquired, are to be collected, on the basis of which the company gets to know whether the new project conceived by the company is profitable or not. Obviously, the company will undertake that project which is profitable. The project which is not profitable will not be undertaken. So whether Mukesh Ambani will invest in Jio or Ratan Tata will invest in launching a new car model, suppose Tata Nano, as you know, it invested earlier, or any such project any company undertakes, before the project is undertaken, the company undertakes an evaluation of that project. That evaluation involves all this information to be collected. And then, as I told you, the guiding principle is the profit. If profit is not there in the business, the company will not undertake. So what, according to Keynes, then, is the factor to determine the decision to invest, as Keynes proposes? According to Keynes, new investment is determined by marginal efficiency of capital in conjunction with the rate of interest. So what he says is that how much a farm will invest, or for that sense, how much an economy will invest. See, what is the investment of an economy? It is the sum total of the investment made by all the farms of an economy. So how much a farm will invest, according to Keynes, is determined by, or whether to invest or not, is determined by the marginal efficiency of capital called MAC in conjunction with the rate of interest, along with rate of interest. So what is this MEC Keynes refers to? MEC is the highest rate of return over cost expected from producing an additional unit of capital. When you produce an additional unit of capital in a new business, or you undertake a new business, how much is what is the highest rate of return over cost to get? To put it otherwise, it is nothing but the annual rate of return over cost that you generate out of a new business. Now, how is this different from what was being said earlier? Earlier, prior to Keynes, it was argued that the decision to invest is determined by the rate of interest only. The classical economists believe that it is the rate of interest which matters for the firms, for the investors, when they decide to invest. If they see the rate of interest rising, they don't invest. If the rate of interest falls, they invest. That means rate of interest is basically the cost of raising capital. A company likes to invest, so it will borrow capital from a source by floating a bond or by borrowing from a bank, or there will be some cost of some kind. It can be rate of interest or some other kind of cost, whatever you say. There is a cost of raising capital. You need to raise capital to invest. So there is a cost of raising capital. Annual cost of raising capital, 10%, 20%, 15%. You are raising 10,000, suppose 10,000 crore rupees from the market. So there is a cost involved in raising the capital. Suppose, let's say that is, you are raising this capital from the bank. You are borrowing it from a bank, and you are paying interest rate of 10%. So that is the cost of raising capital, annual cost of raising capital. Every year you are going to pay 10% interest on 10,000 crore rupees you have borrowed. So higher the rate of interest, higher is the cost of capital, and lower would be the amount of investment you can expect, and vice versa. That is what the classical economists argued. They said that an economy can attract more investment only if the rate of interest is low. But Keynes doesn't agree with that. Keynes says what matters to the investors is MAC, not just rate of interest. It is MAC in conjunction with rate of interest that determines the amount of investment the economy will undertake in any particular time period. It is just not the rate of interest. So why it is so? Whether Keynesian argument is valid or is superior to classical argument, I'll discuss that little later. But let me tell you, what is this MAC I'm referring to? How to derive MAC? MAC, as I told you, is the annual rate of return over cost. How to derive it? To define this MAC, we can say it refers to, or it is that discount rate which equalizes the present value of the expected net returns with the supply price or with the initial amount of capital invested. So I have used a definition, and each part of this definition has a particular meaning. There are various terms I've used. One term I used is MAC is a discount rate by itself. It is an annual discount rate I'm talking about. And how to derive this discount rate? We derive the discount rate by equalizing the present value of the expected net returns from the project with the supply price. So first thing is that, so this tells us that MEC depends upon two elements, two different things. One is the expected net returns from an income yielding asset. That means, you are undertaking a new business, the expected net returns from that particular business, which is otherwise called as prospective yield. How much is the prospective yield you are going to get annually until the end of the project? The project lasts for 5 years. Suppose Tata Motors launches a new car model, or is going to launch a new car model, and it has already decided, or it has got to know that this project will last for 5 years. After 5 years, it will be phased out. So during this 5 years time, annually, how much of net returns the company will get? Why do I use the term net returns? It is the sales revenues annually the company will get minus certain costs the company will bear annually. Variable cost, fixed cost, tax the company will pay to the government, and so on. All those are to be subtracted to arrive at the prospective yield annually. I will talk about this derivation of the prospective yield in another topic. Once this topic is over, I'll discuss that, and then I shall show you how to derive the net cash flows over the life of a project. Then you'll get to know what is that all about. But at this point in time, suppose, let's say, we have estimated the prospective yield. We have estimated the prospective yield over the life of the project. The life of the project is 5 years. Annually, how much of return you are going to get at the end of every year? That is nothing but the prospective yield over the life of the project. Then we need to also know another thing, that is the supply price or the replacement cost. What is the supply price or the replacement cost? It is nothing but the initial amount of capital invested. One-time investment of 100 crores, 500 crores, 1000 crores, that one-time investment that we are undertaking in the new business. So this investment, which is typically called as the replacement cost, because you are possibly replacing the old plant by a new plant. That is the replacement cost we are talking about, or otherwise called as supply price, also called as initial capital that you are investing in the business. So this initial capital you invest today in 2020 or 2021, you get return from 21, 22 for 5 years, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 5 years. What you are going to do, you are comparing the future returns with the present cost. The cost is, that means the initial cost of the project is, suppose 500 crore rupees. That is to be compared with the future returns. Now, if I make the present value of the future returns equal to the supply price, that is the initial cost, I then derive the MEC, marginal efficiency of capital. So how do I do it? This is the formula that we can apply to derive the marginal efficiency of capital. It is the C naught. C naught is nothing but the initial capital invested. C is capital, initial capital. C naught means, I am talking about 0 year in a particular time period I'm talking about. That is the reference year I'm talking about. C naught is equal to summation capital RT upon 1 plus E whole to the power T, where T varies from 1 to N. Number of years or number of time periods. So what is this cap? When I now generalize, simplify this, the summation RT upon 1 plus E whole to the power T, it is nothing but R1 by 1 plus E plus R2 by 1 plus E whole square plus R3 by 1 plus E whole cube, and so on up to Rn by 1 plus E whole to the power N. If the project is for perpetuity, till the nth time period. So the Every year you get some return. That RT, capital RT, is the annual return still of the TH period. Period 1, period 2, period 3. So you get returns. First year 100 crore, second year 120 crore, third year 150 crore. Up to 5 years you are getting the return. So annually you are getting some returns. Now you cannot directly compare add up the values of the future with the present, that is initial capital, to find out how much is the profit. So because the future values, the value of money changes over time. So or whenever it comes to comparing the future with the present, we'll have to derive the present value. I'll talk again about certain other things related to this later on in another topic. At this point in time, I can tell you, as I have already defined what is MEC. MEC refers to that discount rate which equalizes C naught with the present value of RT. Okay, so and what is then MEC? MEC here in this case it is E. E is that discount rate which equalizes the present value of the prospective yields with the initial amount of capital invested. Now, so obviously what will happen? This E that we determine, which will come as an annual rate of return over cost. Now, what is the decision rule then for the company when it comes to deciding whether to invest or not to invest? This E that we determine will come out to be an annual rate of return over cost. And this annual rate of return over cost should be greater than the annual cost of raising the capital. That is R. Maybe it is interest rate. The annual interest rate on the capital raised. That C naught of suppose 500 crore rupees that has been raised from the market by borrowing it from the market, from the bank or from the stock market. So there is an interest or there is a cost involved in raising this capital, annual cost involved. So suppose the annual cost involved is 10%. And the annual return on that capital is 12%. Then the project is profitable. You are getting a surplus of 2% over the cost annually. So if E is greater than R, the project is profitable. Investment is profitable. We will undertake the project. If E is less than R, we will reject the project. But if by chance E is equal to R, which is just a possibility, then we might remain neutral. We are indifferent. We are in dilemma. We don't know what to do. So what we basically do, as you can observe here, when it comes to undertaking decisions, it doesn't only depend upon the rate of interest. It depends upon MEC in conjunction with the rate of interest. We are comparing MEC with the rate of interest. Unlike what the classical economists said, that higher the rate of interest, lower is investment and vice versa. So the solution to low investment is decrease the rate of interest. So then RBI, in our case, RBI will revise the rate of interest or will ask the commercial banks that you please reduce the rate of interest. Now, is it something true? I mean, are classical economists right or the Keynes is right? If you look at today's context in India, I would say that possibly Keynes is right, not classical economists. Why? Look at Indian economy. In 1990s, early 90s, when anyone was borrowing capital from a bank, would be paying an interest of about 12% or 14% annually on a loan. Today, the rate of interest has come down to as low as 6% or 7%. Okay. Now, has it resulted in commensurate rise in investment as much as desired? Investment rate of interest has come down quite significantly from about 14% to 7% or even less than that. But then has investment risen for the entire economy to the desired level? Not necessarily so. Why? It has not been possible. Possibly because when what matters to the business houses is that the MEC should be greater than the rate of interest. I'm not saying rate of interest is not at all important. But what is more important is MEC, not rate of interest. If rate of interest is brought down, but along with fall in the rate of interest, that is also fall in MEC, can you ensure higher? So look at it. Suppose rate of interest was 10%, MEC was 8%. Then you thought that let the rate of interest be 6%, then there would be investment. You brought down the rate of interest to 6%. But when you brought down the rate of interest to 6%, there is no guarantee that MEC would remain unchanged at 8%. It might come down to 4%. When rate of interest comes down, it doesn't necessarily mean that the MEC will remain unchanged. MEC has its own set of factors to determine it, different from rate of interest. So what Keynes says is that your MEC should be always greater than the rate of interest. Another example I'll give you to justify or substantiate my argument as Keynes proposed. Look at Indian economy. Across the country, the states are, you have all the states are not equally industrialized. Some states are more industrialized compared to others. Some states attract more investment compared to others. Why? Why Tamil Nadu is more industrialized? Why Gujarat is more industrialized? Why Odisha is less industrialized, or why West Bengal is less industrialized? If you look at the regions, can you say the factor responsible for this is rate of interest? Because as you know, the rate of interest is same across the country, no matter which state you operate, whether you like to operate in Odisha or West Bengal or Andhra Pradesh or Tamil Nadu, anywhere you like to invest, borrow, you get the rate of interest, you get the loan at the more or less same rate of interest. Then why some states are more industrialized, attract more investment compared to others? Possibly because the MEC assured from the capital invested in one state differs from the other state. So this is yet another reason why we could see that Keynes is possibly right. But I'll discuss this in much detail in the next class. Some other issues related to this when I meet you next in the next class. I'll be meeting your section on Thursday to deal with the remaining part of this particular topic, and not tomorrow. I'll be meeting you on Thursday. Okay, so I'll stop here.